I had this master plan to be the perfect child. I am a gay person, and I come from a very small religious minority in Brazil. I'm Jewish.
Must be tough to be Jewish and gay in Brazil.
It's a very tight-knit community. I did not want my parents to feel ashamed. And that's why from a very young age, I want to live abroad. The perfect child doesn't exist. A life without failure doesn't exist and should not exist.
So what was your most epic failure? Welcome to another episode of YanaTV, where we have authentic conversations with impactful and conscious people of Asia. Today with me is Eduardo. What brought you to Asia and when did that happen?
All right, so I first moved to Asia 10 years ago. I was brought here by the last big corporate company that I work for, which is Danone, actually. So I've been in Singapore on and off for 7 years. Another 3 years I spent in Vietnam. So my COVID years, I spent them in Vietnam.
You actually have quite a bit of different pivots to your career, and you transitioned between corporate and entrepreneurship, and you just sold one business and now work in another one. And so what do you think? Are entrepreneurs born or made?
In my case, I think it was made rather than born. When I started my career, I did not see myself as an entrepreneur because I grew up seeing my father struggle a little bit with his own entrepreneurship journey, even though I do have a couple of very great benchmarks. Both my grandfather and my brother are fantastic entrepreneurs. But when I saw my father growing up and him struggling with that, and at that point, I think the startup scene was not as big as today. My choice was made very clearly once I was at university. I wanted to have a corporate
What kind
career.
of business your father had?
He ran an insurance company. Yeah, he was an insurance agent.
And the struggle, I assume it was inconsistency of the income.
Yes.
That's usually the entrepreneurship
exactly.
journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you decided to go for more safer choice. Tell me a bit more. So you were born in
Brazil. So I was born in Brazil into a loving family. It's 4 of us, 4 siblings.
Tell me something in Portuguese, in Brazilian Portuguese.
Olá, tudo bem?
Olá, tudo bem?
That's the main greeting, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And I'm the third, so I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister.
And so what is so interesting about your family? Is there, every family has something interesting. So what is interesting about
What's
your
so
family?
interesting about my family? I think we're all very different to one another. And I was just in Brazil a couple of 3 weeks ago. I went back after 2 years without going to Brazil. And it was a beautiful moment that we set all our differences aside. Everyone was really present. Everyone was really generous towards each other, which has not been necessarily.
But I think it's like in all families like that.
All families are like that. But I think in this case, we made our differences to be our strength.
You know, that reminds me, I saw there was the Granta magazine, I think the famous magazine with all those stories. So Granta, and they had the whole issue dedicated to family.
Yeah.
And on the cover of the magazine, they had this sort of family picture and this title that families, they fuck you up. You can't live with them and you can't live without them.
Oh yeah,
so
exactly.
I think every family has their own story.
But I'm very grateful to be born into that family, yes.
So tell me one interesting story from your childhood.
So I grew up seeing my mother being anxious about everything. She's an anxious person by nature, but I grew up seeing her anxious with my elder brother not being a good student, with my second brother being a bit of a rebel, and with my sister being born with some physical disabilities. So I took it upon myself. I had this master plan to be the perfect child, which I know in Asia is also a big thing, right?
I was just going to say, I think especially here, it's very relatable because every child here wants to be a perfect child to the parents.
Exactly. I wanted to grow up without giving her one single worry.
So straight A's, sport, I assume, right?
Exactly, yes.
Exemplary behavior, never in the principal office for bad things.
Exactly. And of course, it took me a while to realize that a few things that I have had to work on myself in the last kind of 10 to 15 years all stemmed from the very desire to be the perfect child.
Well, let's talk about that, particularly if you're firstborn.
Yes.
And maybe even more so if you're a firstborn male, then even more expectations.
Yeah.
But I think for girls, it's also tough because then they have to, still become the big sister that does everything. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. Let's
Yes.
look at the good part. So what is the good part? What strengths that you learned that built your character?
Constantly pushing myself to be a better version of myself every day. And I think at work, it pushed me to achieve great things, right? I left Brazil 18 years ago, and my career took me to beautiful places and fantastic jobs that I've learned and grown so much. So I'd say that is the good part of it. It pushes you to excel at what you do. On the flip side of
So
that,
the bad thing,
yeah.
the bad part about being a perfect child?
Is this acute fear of failure, right? If you want to be the perfect child, it means I cannot fail. And that doesn't exist. The perfect child doesn't exist. A life without failure doesn't exist and should not exist, right? Because it's through failure that you grow and learn and grow.
So what was your most epic failure?
The most epic failure, I wouldn't call this an epic failure per se, but there was one thing that, and again, by no means is a failure, but I am a gay person. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was not according to my mom's plan.
Yeah, not according to your mom's plan.
Or
yes.
even my plan for that matter, right? And of course, when that happens, you're like, oh, okay. So, and I come from a very small minority, religious minority in Brazil. I'm Jewish.
Must be tough to
Yes.
be Jewish and gay in Brazil. It's a very small,
It's a very tight-knit community. It's just
everyone knows
roughly,
everyone.
Yeah, it's roughly 100,000 of us. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone is minding the other's business. And of course, wanting to be the perfect child for my mom, that not fit at all. So, and that's, I think, subconsciously as a child, I've always wanted to live abroad. And I think the subconscious aspect of it is just, I did not want my parents to feel ashamed of me in Brazil and the community to talk about it. And that's why, in hindsight, I believe that's one of the main drivers for me to say from a very young age, I want to live abroad. I want to build my life, my career abroad, not in Brazil.
You know, it's interesting. They say it's usually a pain or passion that drives us around the world. Yes. I would say for majority of us, in my mind, probably, 80-90% of people, I think we are driven by pain. Yeah. Pain makes us succeed. Pain makes us go do things. Pain makes us move around. So it only after maybe many, many years of self-reflection and healing, when we finally arrive into passion and we turn it around and we go, you know what, this is actually a strength. And the ugly part about being a perfect child.
You're never happy with yourself.
I can relate to that. I don't know if I ever wanted... Actually, I also think I wanted to be a perfect child because I'm the youngest in the family. My brother was always a troublemaker. And so I felt, it's up to me to be the good girl and provide for the family. So I can relate and just kind of make my mom proud because everyone else let her down.
And in the end, if I look today, I think I see my eldest brother, which was a bad student, is one of the entrepreneurs, most brilliant entrepreneurs I know. My second brother, which is a rebel, he is the person with the biggest purpose I know of. And my sister, who was born with physical disabilities, she is the most she's the warrior, one of the people that I respect the most for her for her willingness to really overcome any obstacle that she faces.
Wow, I'm getting like goosebumps when you're sharing this. It is so strong. So you're growing up and you're realizing that you want to be that perfect child. And so eventually you left and you traveled around the world.
Yes.
And so before coming to Singapore, which was about 10 years ago, you said, right? What was your favorite place?
London.
Why?
I was late 20s, early 30s, kind of bachelor in London.
Of course you want to be in London.
Living the life. And I remember just feeling that I was in the center. I was in this place, beautiful place, in the center of the world, and having this fantastic freedom, meeting people from all over the world, traveling quite a bit around Europe as well. And I remember just having the time of my life.
And then you came to Asia.
I went then to Amsterdam. While I was living in London, I met my then boyfriend, now husband, while I was traveling in Thailand, of all places, and he was living in Amsterdam. I spent 3.5 years in Amsterdam, and after Amsterdam, we both came to Asia.
So if you look at it from this perspective, so someone who grew up in Brazil, right, so South America, and then you spent a lot of time in Europe, and now you're in Asia, what can you say about people?
Be very careful about generalizing. Mm-hmm. People from the UK are like this. People from the Netherlands are like this. You meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds within the same country, within the same kind of microcosmos even. And I think I've always liked to take a one-to-one approach. I'm a great listener. I'm an introvert.
Me too. People never believe that, but I am.
It's where we source our energy from, right? It's so I think that makes me a much better than an average listener. And with that, by having my ears open, I usually manage to learn a lot from them and to understand that the way I deal with this person or the way I deal with that person can be quite different, even though on paper they should be quite similar.
So who is the most memorable person you have met so far and why?
My husband.
Because?
By far. Because he's the most generous, loving, caring person I've ever met.
And I was curious, what quality did you discover within yourself as a result of this connection?
I would say there's an element of being there for the person. Mm-hmm. I know I can, and I think that's something I already knew from my friendships, but I think being there for him, being a person he can rely on, he can trust, I think that's something that I've found myself. I strengthened myself once I met him and still strengthening myself on that.
Okay, what was your first impression of Singapore?
Loved how everything works here. Love that you can live it's everything very convenient, everything works. And I find it a very beautiful place as well, with genuinely very international, very cosmopolitan, which is something that I love. And with people that I like to deal with, I like to talk to. Quite interesting bunch of people that I meet here.
Okay, so let's look again. Good, bad, and the ugly of Singapore. Everyone praises Singapore. All foreigners say, "Oh, it's such an amazing, such a safe place."
Yes.
So, what are bad things about Singapore?
What are bad things? You put me in a spot here. No, I'm kidding. No, the bad thing about Singapore, it's quite a small country. I love to discover. I've traveled far and wide within Asia, so I would love to travel far and wide within Singapore. But it's within the
20
confines
minutes you're in Malaysia.
Of an island. It's small. I would love to have a bigger area, bigger Singapore to explore.
You said the good, the good. Bad, it's too small,
and not the ugly.
Yes.
I think sometimes it's so well organized that if you try to step a little bit out of the matrix, it's like, computer says no, right? You have to, sometimes I struggle with a bit of a lack of flexibility in
I notice it particularly in restaurants very often, and I'm sure if it happened to you, but to me, I'm not going to name the restaurant because it's quite famous, but it happened to me very often. You show up and you look at the menu and I don't know, and I say, okay, can I have my dish with the pasta instead of potatoes, or can I have a different bread? Right. And then the person goes, it's not on the menu. I'm like, I understand.
You almost see the fumes coming out of the business. Like, exactly. Computer saying no, computer saying no.
It's like, no, you cannot. I'm like, okay, never mind. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a bit about your work. Yes. So you have how many years of career in the corporate world?
Big corporations, 18 years.
What was the best sort of experience from that time?
I would say that the toughest and the best was my very last role at Danone. Because it took me out of my comfort zone in many, many ways. And I think there are 3 moments in my career which were the toughest moments. Like one very junior level, one more mid.
So tell me about it.
So I think the 3 times when I started to change kind of 3 different variables within the mix, either moving from a scope of a global role to a local role, or vice versa, changing categories, changing companies, changing categories that I used to work for. Those were the times when I stretched myself the most. So the first 6 to 9 months, I had that feeling like, I'm not gonna make it. This is really tough.
So how did you make it?
I think you just keep grinding and keep going for it. Keep really working through it.
Not giving up.
Never giving up.
Never giving up.
You can bend but not break, right?
That is a good one.
Yeah, and I think and the kind of the following kind of year, 2 years after those kind of very initial like tough times, they were the most rewarding periods of my career.
But I think it probably applies to any other life situations if you think about it, right? If anything new happens, I mean, you start a business, you have a relationship, you have a baby, you move to a new country, it's the same pattern.
Yeah.
First 6, 9, 12 months, very tough. And then, you get hang of it and it becomes really rewarding.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so why did you leave corporate world?
I left corporate world because, after 18 years, I was a little bit tired of it. And look, I think when you work in corporate world, you work for very purposeful brands, very, very purposeful categories. So at Danone, for example, I was working for nutrition categories like infant and medical nutrition, which are super highly purposeful categories to work for, right? But they were not my purpose.
Ah, that's powerful.
Yes, right? So I was looking for that in life.
Your own purpose, not necessarily company's purpose, even though it sounds good on paper and they're doing all the right thing.
Exactly.
But you don't feel it moves your heart in a way how you want it to be moved.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Did you find your purpose?
I think I have.
So how did you do that?
It took me a rejection.
Okay, tell me about rejection.
When I left my previous startup, I was pondering what I wanted to do next, and I came across these statistics that showed that globally we're living longer but not healthier lives. The whole concept of lifespan versus health span. Our health span has not increased, the amount of time that we spend in good health. Which to me, I was like, wow, how is this happening? And I've always had this, what I call healthy obsession with health and wellness. So then I came up with the idea, and my background is in marketing. So I know how difficult it is to change people's behaviors. And when it comes to food, if there's no pleasure involved, forget about it. So I decided I wanted to do something about it. So I created this brand called Koa, which is the very first high protein chocolate brand from Asia. And the rejection moment, which is, I was pitching to an angel investor about my idea, this is what I want to do, etc. It was a good session. I felt there was not a full connection there. And after the session, I was with my advisor in that session. After the session, my advisor gives me a call because he knew that angel. And he said, how did you think that went? And I was like, yeah, it was okay, but I didn't feel the connection there. So that's when he said, the guy understands that you have a healthy obsession with health and wellness, but why? He didn't understand the why. And that even gives me goosebumps because that's exactly when I started linking things up. I grew up seeing my father struggle with his health for the later part of 15 years of his life.
I'm now getting goosebumps as you're sharing it.
I remember 4:30 in the morning, driving him to his dialysis session and being so frustrated. Not because it was 4:30 in the morning, but because I was driving him to his dialysis sessions and seeing him go through that process, very painful process. Now that in the end, it wore him out. And again, seeing him going through those health issues for so long, that subconsciously is what developed in me this healthy obsession with health and wellness. And when you start to link up with this kind of whole concept of health span, living longer and healthier lives, that's exactly the story of my father. So it took me that rejection to really understand, oh, that's where it's coming from, and this is why it resonates so powerfully with me.
So for people who are looking for their purpose, still, rejection, I understand. Good to knock on the doors and get rejected. It might inspire you and you might learn something new.
Yeah.
So what else? Maybe look at your family history, look at how you grow up, because perhaps certain things maybe we didn't see when we were growing up.
Yes.
And we kind of overlooked or didn't interpret it in the right way, right? So what else you feel could help someone on the kind of pursuit of purposefulness?
So there's a couple of things here. The first is, don't think your purpose means something that you think it's the right thing to do. And I'll give you an example of that. The first startup that I co-founded, it was a couple of other people, and it was a plant-based dairy.
Sounds very purposeful to me.
Yes, sounds quite purposeful, right? And to me, it made sense, A, because I was looking into going to the startup world, but B, also, I grew up in a household, my mom was a massive trendsetter. She did not give us any meat, we grew up on soy meat and fish. So when that opportunity knocked on my door, I said, oh, that's a really cool idea, and it aligns with where I come from. So, and I believe it's the right thing to do, right, from a sustainability perspective. But just believing that something is the right thing to do does not mean it's your purpose. And that takes me to the second point, which is, and there's a quote from a famous entrepreneur called Naveen Jain, I think. He says, Passion is for hobbies. Obsession is for people who want to make a real dent in the universe. So I think you have to really dig deep and think, okay, am I doing this just because it feels right? Is this a hobby, or is this something that will make me wake up every morning and say, I want to help people live not only longer, but also healthier lives by changing simple existing habits every day.
And with that, when you look sort of out there into the world, and maybe turn to your father. If you could say something to your father, since he's the biggest inspiration of what you are doing right now, what would you say to him?
I would like to thank him for teaching me what generosity means, how to be generous, because he was the most generous, one of the most generous men I've ever met as well.
Thank you so much. That was Eduardo on YanaTV.
Corporations, 18 years.
That's a lot. You look like you're young. I don't know. What age did you start?
Just right after college, right?
Right. You still look young.